Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Story to Screen podcast, the movie podcast where we review all different kinds of movies, new and old. I am your host, Chris, and welcome to our penultimate episode, 99, before we hit 100. We're one episode away from the big 100th event next Friday night. I
feel so old.
Yes, and as you just heard right there is, well, the comrade in arms that started with me 3 years ago on Story to Screen. Yes,
Lies.
3 years ago we started Story to Screen together, and
Story to Screen is old enough to wear big boy pants, Chris.
Well, maybe 3-year-old diapers. Just saying.
Pull-ups?
Pull-ups?
Pull-ups, yeah. I'm a big kid now.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I'm kind of out of the baby product diaper swing, so I'm not 100%. But yes, you know, as you heard, Joshua Ling is with me tonight for this, you know, on the eve of our milestone. So I thought it was appropriate that the guy that helped me start this podcast 3 years ago would join me on the eve of our big celebration. Last year was our 50th episode, but 100. I mean, Josh, you know, it's been a while since you've been on the podcast, but you know, how excited are you for the 100th event?
I'm super excited, man. I really wish I could get to Atlanta to be there with Ben and Ian and stuff. Things just been pretty crazy on my end, but I'm really excited that it's come this far. You've really done an amazing job keeping this going, and I'm glad I was able to help in all the various ways I could. I wish I could still help more, but you know, things are moving on. You know, things are moving up and on.
Yeah, I mean, it's the season of life, and I think we'll talk about that during our 100th episode. I mean, folks, you never know. I mean, this could be the end of Story to Screen. Next week could be the final episode. I mean, a lot of people are kind of wondering, like, is this the end? Are you done with Story to Screen?
Over? Did you say over? Yeah. Nothing is over until we decided it. Yeah.
I said I'll say if it's over. You know, I have the final word.
Yeah,
I'm greedy
that
boss. Way. Yeah, I'm the boss. I'm the boss. You're the co-boss. You're the co-boss. But no, I mean, you know, you're on the verge of, you know, getting married and all that stuff, and you know, changing jobs and all that. So you're begin a new chapter in your life, which is tremendous. I mean, you know, it's everyone goes, you know, through these big, massive changes that unfortunately do require some sacrifices. You know, sacrifices on hobbies and being around certain people and all that stuff, or doing things you love. I mean, it does require some sacrifices in those areas. But you know, I don't have to. You know, I really don't want to speak for you in a way like that. You know, it's.
No, you got it. You're on point.
Yeah, and but you know, again, we'll talk about that. You know, we'll talk about during 100. So anyway, so tonight's movie review is the 1938 classic, The Wizard of Oz.
Many, many miles east of nowhere lies the amazing land of Oz, a magnificent empire created in the mind of a man who wrote a great book about it. Like wildfire in the wheat field, the fabulous tale of the Wizard of Oz spread from town to city to nation to the entire world. Although the Wizard of Oz has captivated the children of 4 generations and fired the imaginations of those youthful adults who have never grown old, although 10 million copies of the book have reached eager hands and eager hearts, no one has dared the towering task of giving life and reality to the land of Oz and its people. Every delightful character of L. Frank Baum's classic is now reborn. Every glorious adventure has been recaptured and painted with a rainbow. The celebration in Munchkinland, the flying monkeys, the rescue of Dorothy, the castle of the witch, the Palace of Oz, and Dorothy's strange journey to the Emerald City to find the wonderful Wizard of Oz himself.
We're off to see the wonderful Wizard of Oz. We hear he is the Wizard of Wiz, if ever a Wiz there was. If ever, oh, ever a Wiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does. We're off to see the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
What you just saw was the original trailer for The Wizard of Oz. It stars Judy Garland, Judy Garland, Ray Bolger, and so many other classic actors from classic cinema. So, this is another one of those. We've been doing like a lot of great classic movies. We did Sabrina, Nosferatu, Lord of the Rings, Return to the King. And now we're doing what many consider one of the greatest fantasy movies, if not one of the greatest movie musicals of all time, too. So, and based off one of the most iconic pieces of literature of the 20th century. So Josh, I'm going to start with you. What's been your relationship with the Oz books and the world of Oz?
Yeah, the books. I listened to them on LibriVox probably about 6 years ago. For those of you who don't know what LibriVox is, they take public domain books and read them out loud in audiobook form. I really like them. I like Baum's approach to things. It's very imaginative, very childlike. He also gets pretty metaphorical with things. I don't think that there's too deep an allegory with anything, but they're enjoyable. They kind of just take you on a journey. I think the journey is the most attractive thing about the books. Baum is one of those guys who I put him next to Lewis Carroll. I think there's a lot of similarities between the Wonderland stories and Oz. They're just kind of like flights of fancy. It kind of is a transition point, both Wonderland and Oz, from the more dark Brothers Grimm style fairy tales of many years before that, and starting to change fairy tales to be more for children. And instead of like more for adults, which is what fairy tales that's what they were for originally. People just kind of told them to the kids because the kids begged for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just one of those things that I really see Wonderland and Oz being a transition into the period of George MacDonald, who did The Princess and the Goblin, and then George MacDonald really inspired Tolkien and Lewis, which in turn inspired Rowling and Martin and all those kind of people that we have today, and Joss Whedon and things of that nature. I really feel like you could definitely see a lineage and a transition point with L. Frank Baum and Lewis Carroll. I think they're very similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me as well, my introduction to Oz was through this film, but, outside of the Wizard of Oz film, I have read 6, 7 of the books. How many books are there? There's like 20 something books.
I don't remember.
Yeah. I know there's a lot, and I think they were all written by Baum. I don't think there was like any other. I don't think anybody else wrote them. I think he was the only one that wrote all of them.
I think you're correct.
Yeah, I think as far as I'm aware of. But the books, specifically the first one, because it's the one that really stands out in my mind the most. From what I can recall, and this was years ago, how tonally different it is from this film.
Yeah.
And but just the it's a very this was like the 20th century introduction to the fairy tale. And there's kind of a difference between, I mean, there's similarities between fairy tales and fantasy, and this was kind of the like what you were saying about Wonderland. These are like the pinnacles of the fairy tale classics, of the 20th century in terms of literature, taking us forward. And it was like, but as you said, it was like for children and all that. And
yeah, exactly. Because when you look at very briefly, when you look at things like Brothers Grimm, when you got things like Three Billy Goats Gruff, where there's murder and all kinds of other stuff going on, and even Sleeping Beauty, Story of Briar Rose, where there's incest and all kinds of other insanity and ogres eating people and all, really, really horrendous stuff. And then, but the kids loved that kind of stuff because it was, oh, that's creepy, ew, gross, all that kind of thing. It was more like Goosebumps.
Wait a minute.
Back in the day, and then Baum kind of took the wonderment of it and stripped a lot of the not all of it, but some of the creepier stuff out of it.
Now, was there an incest relationship in Sleeping Beauty?
In the original, I think Perot version, there's something like that in there. I think it's more like adopted incest situation or something. I have to go back and look at it, but I know like after she wakes up, the prince is actually like his mother is an ogre or something like that, and I know there's some cannibalism and all kinds of other.
I don't remember this from the
Disney, right?
Yeah.
Not even close.
Dude, everything
I'm telling you, dude, it is some freaky junk. You gotta.
All I can recall is. From like my fantasy comes from like, especially like these famous like fantasy stories all comes from Disney somewhat,
Oh yeah. Most people, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Game of Thrones existed like they were doing Game of Thrones way before.
Okay, let me give you one big example. There's a bajillion different versions of Cinderella out there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But one of them, I believe, the Malaysian tale. A lot of the Asian area versions of Cinderella. There's a Malaysian one in particular, I believe, that basically Cinderella's mother was reincarnated into a fish, and the fish served as the fairy godmother in the story. However, after Cinderella went to the ball and swooned the prince and all that other kind of stuff, to get revenge, the stepsisters actually fry up the fish and serve it to Cinderella.
What?
Yes.
Wow. And I thought Game of Thrones was much more crueler in its.
Where do you think Game of Thrones gets it from?
Martin, I'm gonna give Martin some credit right there. He probably looked at like, hey, these fantasies that you thought were like innocent and childlike, they are far more brutal than you realize.
Exactly.
I think. Well, Martin kind of draws more from history. Yeah. But that's interesting. So that Cinderella ain't gonna go to Captain D's or have any sushi.
Oh no. Oh wow, Chris! Wow.
Hey, Prince Charming, where do you want to go eat tonight? Hey, I thought about going to Captain D's tonight. You want to go there? Hey, Cinderella, you want to go get some Captain D's? Want to get some hush puppies too?
Oh
What
wow.
would be the hush puppies? The
Okay.
rats.
I'm down. I could be reincarnated as a hush puppy.
Hey, you taste good as a hush puppy.
Hashtag things I didn't think I'd say tonight.
Exactly. Wow, we went on a wild, crazy thing there.
That was still fun.
That was good. That was good. No, oh gosh, what was it again? Okay, back to where, Oz. Yeah, Oz. No, so, I love the books, and the books are great, and they're just wonderful, stories to read, and, but yeah, now going on to the movie, Joshua, now, general impressions of the movie. I mean, what's been your relationship to this iconic film, and your general impressions?
I've always loved this movie. Ever since I was little, I knew all the songs. I grew up with the movie before I read the books, just like you. I always loved the transition between black and white and color. I think I got that on an emotional level before I ever understood the metaphorical point of it, which I think is very powerful. I think that the imagery is bright and amazing and full of wonder. I think the acting by today's standards is pretty hammy, but it gets the point across, and it feels more like a stage play in a lot of cases, like a lot of the movies around that time did. I think that the main thing that I really get out of it is the heart of the message. There's no place like home, and you basically grass isn't always greener on the other side kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do love the heart that shines through in the story, and I definitely got that from a very early age. I really understood that film emotionally, and I think that's one of the reasons that I love it so much, is because even if I didn't understand all that was being said at every single moment during the movie, even as like a 4 and 5-year-old, I could understand she just wants to get home,
Mm-hmm.
and I really connected with that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My relationship with this movie. This is probably another one of those films that I remember watching so many times as a little kid. I never got tired of it as a kid, and I just watched it for the first time in 10 years. Actually, it's been a long time since I've seen it, and I got into other things and all that, but it is surprising of just how, I watched it so many times as a kid, and it was great then. I watch it now again. It still holds up in every way possible. Like, it is the pinnacle. It's everything that you. How can I say this? It's everything that you remember it. Even if you haven't seen it in a long, long time, it's everything that you remember. That you remember what it was or what it is and all that. So it's this timeless story, just a timeless story, and it's kind of like a story that comes to mind. And I don't know if you would agree with this, but the story that comes to mind every time I see and think about this pilgrimage that Dorothy takes, this quest that she takes, to get back home. I find somewhat of similar. I find it similar to Pilgrim's Progress in John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, although it's a lot more allegorical and it's and very straightforward in its storytelling about what it's trying to symbolize. I
think there's a lot of parallels there for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's not necessarily a story about the Christian walk with the Lord. And the temptations that we face, the victories, the triumphs, the losses, the weakness of our own humanity, or something like that. There are, in the movie. I mean,
there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah, I mean, in the movie, I think there are moments like that stand out. Maybe like the scene, like the flowers. Because there is a sequence in the book of Pilgrim's Progress where, Christian and one of his comrades, they go into a valley of flowers and they fall asleep, something like that.
Mhm.
And but yeah, it is this, this pilgrimage of finding, the one thing that does shock me about the Dorothy character is that she's not not at all is she wrestling with the, do I stay here and be content with these people, with these Oz people, or do I go back home to reality, or to the real world? You don't really get a sense of, unless you do, maybe, Joshua, but I never get a sense that she is torn between the two worlds at all.
Yeah, no, she. Here's the thing. I think that the main, she sings in the beginning "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" because she feels like she doesn't belong now. But the trip to Oz, the tornado, the traumatic experience made her, and the traumatic experiences that come from Oz, I think they don't slowly make her realize. She realizes immediately, but she more fully realizes it through her journey that she belongs in Kansas. It's one of those things where it's really a story of learning where you belong. And I think in Pilgrim's Progress, it's very similar in regard to the Christian finds out where he belongs very close to the beginning of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't realize how much he belongs there, to what extent, to what fullness he belongs in, what is it, the Celestial City?
Yeah, Celestial City, yeah.
He doesn't fully realize how much he belongs and how much he longs for the Celestial City until he goes through his journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's exactly the same way with Dorothy. She realizes very early on when she arrives in Munchkin Land, I don't belong here. I belong home. I was wrong. She realizes she was wrong about Kansas very immediately, but she doesn't realize the extent of it until she breaks down in the Emerald City with the balloon leaving her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even towards the end, I know we're kind of skipping way ahead of ourselves, but even at the end when she's there talking to the friends, even after the balloon has left, her three friends, or the Cowardly Lion kind of says, stay with us, Dorothy. We'll all miss you. But I think in that moment she realizes there that, as much as these people love her, she still there's someone out there. And then, because if you think about this, her whole arc is kind of coming from a guilt complex, because she runs away from home because, Miss Gulch is, she's threatened to take her dog, and she loves her dog so much that they run away from home. And then she runs into the traveling, magician fella, and and he kind of manipulates her to kind of, hey, go back home. And I when I watched it again, it was like, oh, now I get what you're doing. You weren't really a magician after all. You were manipulating her to get back home. So he was kind of trying to do a good deed, trying to save her.
Yep.
And so she gets home, and she's trying to get back with her aunt and uncle, but because she feels guilty because she thinks that she still thinks that her aunt believes that she has left home, that she ran away from home, and that, she's, for whatever reason, that's kind of the motivation that springs her arc forward. So she basically wants to cleanse her conscience of that feeling.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of that, but I think that the thing that started her the catalyst for this whole situation really comes back to Dorothy felt like she didn't belong.
But even then, she kind of, like, when the whole Twister things, I think she kind of, well, when she meets the magician, she realizes where she belongs right there and then.
Absolutely. Yes.
So her her whole arc is kind of wrapped up at the almost at the very end of the first act, which is the whole Candace sequence, and then she's been boomeranged into a completely different direction, and now she has to go on this extended journey to basically quench that complex feeling that she's having, or that desire, so to speak.
Yeah, in that way, it's also similar to, we talked about Pilgrim's Progress, talking another parallel film, Homeward Bound.
Mm-hmm.
Similar situation there, where problems arise, causing a big misunderstanding, and then they become far-flung from Home Alone. There's another one.
Yeah. Well, the boy stays home. That's the difference.
Well, Home Alone is similar, but Kevin does realize later that that he misses his people. But I wouldn't consider the character arc wrapped up when they decide they want them back. I think it's more like it's an interesting structure for sure as far as the way the story works, but I really feel like the main thing is, in anyone's life, if they have a moment where they realize what they wanted was there all along, there is still a discovery period of realizing the depth of and the fullness of how much you needed that thing all along.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I mean, her home. That's basically it. I mean, her desire is to get home, but she realizes how much she realizes how much she is truly loved, and that even in the chaotic nature of life, which was going on, and what I like about this film is that, because in the Baum book, I think you're left to assume that it's like either at the very end of the 19th century, of like 1899 or something like that, or just like a couple of years after the turn of the century. But I think this film, I think you get the sense that this could be like Great Depression era Kansas. Just the feel of
possibly.
it. Yeah, I mean, you don't really get a sense of which specific time period this is.
That's one of the things that makes it so timeless, quite honestly.
The Kansas sequence specifically. Well,
there isn't a lot of time markers. We know it's in the past, and we know it's after a certain period because there's machinery on the farm. This isn't the Middle Ages, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
But and the clothes, to a certain extent, are definitely a post-Victorian era, but it's not. It doesn't. It could be 100-year difference. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It really could. It really could be as far back as the, pretty much the post-Civil War period, the 1880s, anywhere from there to, really the Great Depression, like you were saying, which isn't 100 years, but it's like 50 years, something like that.
Yeah, no,
which is a really wide spectrum.
Yeah, and I think I think that's why they kind of went for that interesting kind of black and white feel. I know there's a what's it called again? It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, that because black and white movies had a specific black and white feel. That's a very unique film look. And the kind of, but I noticed that like a lot of photographs of the Great Depression had that look. So that's why I'm leaning more towards that this could be Great Depression era Kansas, actually.
Sure.
Because
and also the other thing that it does on a metaphorical level, on a story level, is it creates a mundanity to Kansas and a rich brightness to Oz that I think really differentiates the two places. It makes Oz feel so much other, so much grander than Kansas, but also at the same time it makes Kansas feel more comforting, if that makes sense. It makes it feel more homey. And I let me point this out real quick too, because you were talking about she wants to go home. That's the main thing she wants. But like, I think there's two different things that she wants as far as home. One is she wants to go back to Kansas because she realizes that Kansas is a place, the physical people that she loves. But on a whole other level, I think she wants the same exact thing that she wanted when she visited the magician, and that is home.
A sense of
an
belonging?
Ideal sense.
A sense
the
of belonging.
idea of home.
A sense of belonging, basically.
Yes.
that she wants to belong to somewhere or to some place or someone. And it's really just that you personally fill in a gap in the universe, really. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a completely universal feeling that even the youngest of infants really feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that really connects with all audiences, and the reason it's become such a classic is because it's such a completely universal feeling. You look at, like, there's so many songs written about this exact same thing. The ones immediately springing to mind are Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls and Place in This World by Michael W. Smith. There's just such and really, I think it stems from the fact that, this is getting theological here, but we live in a fallen world, and we know that this fallen world isn't what we were made for. And we don't know how we know that. I mean, we do when we're Christians. We know how we know that. But I think everybody, even non-Christians, has this same feeling of this isn't where I belong. And I'm not saying we belong in heaven and don't belong on earth. I'm not saying that, because we belong here, and there's going to come a time with new heavens and new earth. But what I'm saying is we were created for Eden. That was what the human race was created for, and we lost it.
Yeah.
And that whole entire brokenness, that not necessarily brokenness, but bent nature of the way the world is something that causes us to completely relate to Dorothy on this much more mundane story level.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Just to progress our review, now this kind of begs this question: was Oz real or was it fake? That seems to be the debate amongst audiences as to, was Oz real or was it in her imagination while she was knocked out? What was that?
I said,
I'm torn. I want to believe that it was real, because in the books, and if you read further on, you actually find out that Oz is actually real, but it is kind of this heavenly, spiritual reality. It can only be seen by others who are allowed to see it.
Yes.
And spoiler alert for those who read the books, Auntie Em and Uncle Henry do go to Oz, actually. So, but in the, I think I can't really say what's in the book because it's been a long time, but in the movie, I might have to say, I'm gonna probably have to say that it was in her imagination. The reason why I'm saying that is, kind of going through, like, examining it on an Inception level, she had the perceptions of the Cowardly Lion and, the Scarecrow and the Tin Man, with the hired hands. Which was interesting because they're not in the book. The three hired hands are not in the book. So,
Mhm.
they inserted those into the movie, which was interesting, in that way. And also the actual Oz, the actual wizard character. So they, the magician that was wandering around. So I think she was taking, and also Miss Gulch as the Wicked Witch. So these are kind of the figments of her imagination and what she kind of not necessarily views these individuals, but well, yeah, in a way she does view these characters in that sense, but maybe not as a lion but just their conscience feelings and their souls, like who she views them on a soul level and her perceptions of them. You know what I mean?
Yep, I sure do.
Yeah.
I tend toward in the movie. I kind of separate the books and the movies to a certain extent. I think that the movie, it's pretty clear that Oz wasn't, and I hate using the term wasn't real.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that does it justice. I think that they're these stories are real to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's not that they are physically in existence in the exact same way we are, but they are real. They are existent. They have effect on us. They're real in the same way that wind is real, but you can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
You can only feel its effects. And so I hesitate to use the words not real or fake or something like that. It was a manifestation of the feelings that were inside of her and the trauma that she went through with the tornado.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, perfect. Well, then now this kind of begs this question. Was Miss Gulch killed during the tornado incident? But, that does kind of beg that question. Did the dream mimic the reality? You know what I mean?
Yeah, we obviously don't see that, but I would probably say no.
I would say yes,
because,
actually.
Yeah, it's possible, but my reasoning behind that is, usually when you kill someone accidentally or on purpose in a dream, I'm not saying that dreams affect reality in the same way they would in the movie universe. This was obviously a lot more paralleled than a normal dream would be, but I feel like just because Dorothy had such fear and loathing, in Las Vegas, no, in Kansas, for fear and loathing for Miss Gulch, that really it was just a fantasy manifestation of what she would hoped would happen to at least the mean nature of Miss Gulch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily her person or itself,
mm-hmm.
But to the mean nature.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's what makes it work so perfectly is that she becomes that manifestation of a witch. But yeah, in terms of why I think she's killed off. Well, I think there could be something there with in the tornado sequence when she's riding the twister with the house and all that, and you see Miss Gulch on the bicycle. I think you can maybe assume, because you didn't see anybody else, because obviously with tornadoes cause great devastation, and I mean we don't know how far she was from town. We don't know all that stuff about how far they are. For all we know, she could have been caught up in that storm, pulled off away. That's my interpretation of why maybe she got killed. Maybe that's where I'm kind of pulling it from. Even though that whole sequence is just in her head, there could be something there that says Miss Gulch may have been killed. Okay, so I guess we'll talk about, we've talked so much about the Dorothy Gale character, but Judy Garland specifically. I mean, this is essentially the movie that made Judy Garland into a movie star. So, and this is our first time having Judy Garland on the show. So, Judy Garland, welcome to the show. So,
from beyond the grave.
From beyond the grave, give us your rendition of,
well, it is almost Halloween.
Yeah. There you go. So I'll be sure to insert her skeleton in there in the.
Okay, so you said do my rendition. Am I doing my impression of her accent in this movie, or am I singing something?
Well, why not? Go ahead and let's see your version. You want to do? You can do the Judy Garland version, and then you can do
the impression here.
Okay.
Of her voice.
Yeah.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. I can't do her voice. I used to be able to.
Toto.
It's an accent that's just so like, oh golly gee, Auntie Em. Just like
Toto,
it always cracks me up. I love hearing people do that accent.
Toto, I'm afraid we're not in Kansas anymore. I can't
like, oh golly gee, such and such.
Well, you know what? It's funny. You know what I like about her performance? I don't know I can't remember how old she was. I think she was like 15, 20 years old when she played this role. But she really
know they had to tape certain areas to make her look younger.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, they had to. Did not know that. But anyway, what I found interesting was that, you know, she actually manages to kind of, for her age, and she really does. And if you notice really closely, she kind of brings this kind of like gee whiz quality to her throughout the performance.
Yes.
Like gee whiz, but in a childlike manner. You know what I mean? Like she really portrays that. Like she's doing this weird gesture with her hands. Like her hands are kind of slightly extended to the sides. You know, in the ways that her posture and all that. And I kind of, you know, as if she's, you know, completely. I wouldn't say completely out of her. I mean, yeah, out of her element. But she's like trying to take it in with her physical mannerisms. Did you notice that throughout the performance?
Oh yeah, definitely. She's giving a stage performance in a movie. Really.
Yeah. So we basically just covered almost like the first act, and you know, and I do view this movie as like a 3-act film. You know, the first act to me is it definitely first act to me is Kansas. Second act is everything with introduction to Oz, the discovery of the friends, and
basically till they get to the Emerald City.
Yeah, I say third act is the Emerald City. That's where the third act really begins. And I think actually this is a good movie to use for story structure class, actually. Yeah.
It's definitely very for movies especially, I think it gives a very good story structure. As far as the story itself, I think it also follows Hero's journey to a certain extent. Yeah, it follows Hero's journey pretty well.
Okay.
I had to think about it here for a second. Joseph Campbell's Hero's journey, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it Hero Cycle. You know, there's various names to it. She definitely meets allies and enemies, has a mentor. She refuses the call a little bit with the whole situation running to the magician. There's a pretty great structure there, honestly, for a hero's journey, which is really kind of the archetypal Arthurian Greek Odyssey kind of story. You know, the main story of the hero coming from, you know, it's really kind of similar to Star Wars in that way. Someone coming from a small place into a bigger place and facing all the trials and having a mentor and all this sort of stuff to kind of help them through. And then there's allies and enemies and smaller enemies, and the smaller enemies give you tools to fight the big enemy.
Yeah.
You know, it's very similar that way.
I would say, though, the difference is that this is not a movie about destiny and fate. This is more about... Star Wars is more about fate in that sense. This is more about, you know, getting back home. There's not really, like, you know, greater purpose aspect to the character. I mean, well, you take in the Wicked Witch and that fact that she kills her, you can say that was a
I really think that the Wicked Witch, the Wicked Witch, honestly, to me, it's more representative. The character of the Wicked Witch is more representative of everything Dorothy hates about Kansas.
Okay.
And really, as she's going along, moving through her journey, she's tempted a lot by Oz to stay there. She never gives in, but she's tempted by all these various things, especially in the Emerald City when she gets there, and all the, when they're in the merry old land of Oz, all that kind of stuff, and they're showing her all the cool stuff that's there, and she doesn't fall for it. She stays steadfast, and she wants to get home, but the thing that's keeping her there, in a very real sense, keeping her there in Oz and foiling her from getting home, is the Wicked Witch, which, it's Miss Gulch. It's all the things that she hates about Kansas, the meanness and the frankness of the people around her in Kansas. And, when she finally deals with it in a very instinctive way of just throwing the water. She didn't really know. She was just trying to save her friend, but she did it in an offensive way. She didn't know that the effect it would have, but she was trying to stop. She finally engaged instead of ran away. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
All these negative issues, and they melted right before her once she engaged them.
Yeah,
and it's at that moment that her resolve to get home is the strongest, because now she has the broom from the Wicked Witch. Now she can go to the wizard.
Mm-hmm. I've never thought about that before. I've never thought about that aspect before. I thought more that she was the primary, Miss Gulch image and something like that. Now, I don't know how the character in the book, what she's supposed to represent in the book, specifically the Wicked Witch. What is she?
Yeah, it's been a while, so I wouldn't really know.
Yeah.
I'd have to look at it again. But as far as the movie goes, that's the way I read it.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of what else. Okay. Well, talking about some of the other characters. I mean, you also have these other iconic side characters. I mean, you have Ray Bolger's Scarecrow, Jack Haley's Tin Man, and Bert Lahr as the Cowardly Lion. I mean, these are three, iconic individuals. I mean, both the characters, the movie versions, and just the story versions as well. I mean, you look at whenever you see the original, artwork for the original published stories, immediately who those characters are. You look at them and immediately. And they're wonderful. One of the things I loved about the original books is that the beautiful artwork that was done back then. There were some really beautiful drawings of the time, and looking at what these actors bring to the roles. I mean, I think the standout, of course, is the Scarecrow, Ray Bolger's Scarecrow. I mean that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've seen Ray Bolger in other great classic movies, but to me, he's the Scarecrow. He'll always be the Scarecrow. Whether I see him, as a guest star on TV shows or other movies, I'm always thinking Scarecrow. That is the... I love the Scarecrow. I mean, what are your thoughts on, some of the supporting, the three supporting, Fellowship kind of characters?
Yeah, well, I can remember when I was little, I was a big fan of the Tin Man just because I thought metal was cool.
Me too. I like Tin Man too.
But when I was little, I really liked him. I had a little toy axe, and I would find a funnel and put it on my head. All that kind of stuff.
Same here.
Played like I had an oil can. That was when I was little. I always thought the Tin Man was cool. But yeah, as I grow older, I really love the Scarecrow. The Cowardly Lion is super, super campy and silly, and some of the humor, almost the vaudeville of the Cowardly Lion is great as well. Like I said, the Scarecrow really stands out because he's got such compassion for Dorothy. I think that's the thing that really endears us to him from the get-go, is he really, like, he's not. I would say there's almost a little bit more selfishness with the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion, although there's not a lot. But they're more kind of bumble-headed in many senses. They both have stronger fear. Tin Man's not super afraid, but Cowardly Lion obviously is. But the Scarecrow is going to stand by Dorothy even if he gets lit on fire.
Mm-hmm,
you know what I mean? Like, there's something very heroic and noble about him, but he's very, very compassionate.
Yeah.
And he may not have brains to figure everything out, but he's going to stand up and he's going to help regardless. And that's one of the things I think really endears us to his character.
No, absolutely. I think that's why, one, not only is he the most iconic of the three, but many consider him like the fan favorite of the three companions. And what I think of the three, he has the most human aspect of the three. The other ones are just kind of, I think they're all compassionate characters. I don't view them as selfish or anything like that. I think like maybe more so the cowardly.
Selfish is the wrong word. Almost more like
self-interest.
Self-interested is closer to what I'm trying to say. I think survival is kind of what I'm getting at. Is they care more about their own skin in a lot of cases.
I would say Cowardly Lion. Tin Man, I think Tin Man is a little bit more vulnerable in terms of his emotions, I think.
Yes.
I think he's a little bit more vulnerable. Cowardly Lion is a little bit more... I think he's more coward. He's definitely, more self... He thinks he can be... I think there's an interesting contrast to that. He thinks he can be, compassionate towards others and selfish, but he is a bit of a selfish guy. He's willing to run away when Dorothy needs him the most. So,
yep. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
And this can be pasted on toward the end if you want, whatever you want to do as far as the podcast goes. But what is your favorite Wizard of Oz parody or tribute? Because there's a lot of them out.
Oh gosh, I have seen the ones that I've seen are very crass.
Well, I'm personally thinking of Adventures in Odysseys, the Wonderful Wish He Was. Did you ever listen to that one?
I did listen to that one, and I was really let down by that one. Not gonna lie.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. I thought they really... It's been a long time since I've listened to that one, but I actually was not a big fan of that one. I was really let down by that one, as well as like the Three Little Pigs version, but...
If you ever get a chance, listen to The Great Wish He Was again, because it really is good. They really hit a lot of the strong. They kind of turned it into a Pilgrim's Progress, and it's really interesting.
Okay.
So,
okay. No, I'll be sure to check it out. It's just I just don't have that. Oh man. I think the ones that I've seen are really stupid and very and vulgar. I mean, they're really stupid. There's like an MTV version that they did. It was like claymation, and then there's like this. They find a fifth companion, and I won't say what happens, but it goes kind of like into this Django Unchained.
That's funny.
So they basically find a black slave in Oz. With one leg. But, when we get to the Oz, just speaking about Oz specifically, I think, this movie was completely shot on soundstage, so they didn't go out there and shoot on location or anything like that, and you really can't, technically. The one thing I do kind of criticize about the Oz, when we get to the Emerald City, is that I think it lacks the... What is it? I think it lacks in the book. Baum describes it with a much more there's a lot more glare of the Emerald City. I think you can. I mean, I think they captured as well as they could with what they had at the time in terms of Emerald City wise, but I think it's missing that glare. I've heard there are I think in the book it's described as bright lights, and it's almost like a Hollywood type of palace or mansion. There's almost something about it that's glittering with green and sparkles. There's that sparkly look, and I think it's there at points in times, but I think it's kind of lacking a little bit more of what Baum described in the books.
Yeah. So you're saying that's a horse of a different color?
Yeah.
Hey-o!
Oh, bit of trivia. Do you know that the guy, the carriage, the cabbie, and the guard.
Oh, come on, Ian!
Yeah, the doorman, the cabbie, the guard, and apparently the doctor are all portrayed by Frank Morgan, who played the wizard and the professor.
Yes.
You knew that?
Yes.
I did not know that until a little while ago. I just found that out a little while ago. I'm like, I did not know that. I've watched this movie for so many years.
Showing up everywhere.
But I noticed maybe I noticed it this time around because there was a voice with the cabbie driver. I'm like, oh, okay. Could it be him? Nah, it can't be him. Can't be him. But okay. Oh, okay. Here's another bit of trivia with the Tin Man. Get ready for this. The Tin Man was originally going to be played by what's his name again? I think his name was Jack Carlson, who played the paw in Beverly Hillbillies.
Yep.
I've seen pictures of him when he was young. He's really a really tall guy. He has that Jimmy Stewart body structure.
Yeah.
Which is which in the books, if you look at those early artworks, he is kind of a tall, thin looking dude. And I kind of would have been interested in that, but what you kind of get here is a much more bulkier version of the Tin Man, somewhat.
Yeah, you know why he couldn't be the Tin Man, right?
Yeah, because of the makeup, the paint makeup, basically. And
he had a allergic reaction to the paint.
Yeah, and I mean, I it would have been interesting. I mean, I do like what Jack Haley brings to this role. I mean, he. Oh, did you hear about this? Some people think he's actually a gay character.
Yeah, I can see people saying that, but no, come on, people.
Oh my god. I'm just are you kidding me? Tin Man gay.
That's what I'll go ahead and give him. Let's be honest here. There's so much craziness out there as far as Wizard of Oz goes because of Wicked, which is an amazing musical, I'm not going to lie, but people just kind of adopt any kind of outcast character, any kind of vulnerable outcast character, and go, oh, look, they're gay!
Big question about The Witcher, because I've not seen or heard the musical. Yeah, I know of it.
Yeah.
Is it a prequel or a sequel?
It is a prequel. It is the story of Elphaba, who is the Wicked Witch of the West, in Oz. It has nothing to do with Miss Gulch or anything like that. It's essentially a tragedy of how she tried to stand up to the establishment, which was legitimately bogus and fraudulent, and was continuing to do evil things. And she tried to stand up to it, and with Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, as her friend, but Glinda backed out on her, and she ended up becoming labeled as wicked, and it paints the Wicked Witch of the West in a much more tragic figure, kind of a martyr.
Yeah,
it is a very good story. I do think that there's so many, Disney's borrowed so much from it with Maleficent and Frozen and a few other things that I'm getting sick of that kind of story,
that's what I was thinking
but
of.
I think Wicked did it really well.
Okay. Now, what you just described there, is that in the Oz, the Sam Raimi, the Oz, the Great and Powerful? You know what I'm talking about?
They kind of took a little bit of that and tried to sprinkle it in, but they changed her story again, and it's not the same. They just have a little bit of that in there with Mila Kunis.
Okay. How's Mila Kunis as the witch?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yeah. And so, but for real, like, Idina Menzel, who is the voice of Elsa in Frozen, played the Wicked Witch of the West, Elphaba on Broadway, etc. And that was the thing that made her famous, was Elphaba. She has an amazing voice, extremely powerful voice,
mm-hmm.
and the story is very, very good. And I definitely recommend, like, either watching it on YouTube or reading the script. Listening to the music, especially. The music is spectacular.
Okay.
I think it's the best music-wise Broadway musical to come out since. I'm not really counting the Disney ones because those were off Broadway before they were on Broadway. Probably the best music since come from Broadway, since I would say Les Miserables.
Really? Okay. Wow. That's a big big one right there.
It's an incredibly good musical.
Okay. But it has no ties to the film whatsoever, because that was another subject I was going to bring up. But it's not a prequel or a sequel to the film, right?
In a sense it is, but it's more to the story in general, the prequel to the Dorothy story, than it is to specifically the movie.
Okay, because it seems like, because you've noticed that even after this film, this movie is like exists on a completely different pedestal than the book.
Yes.
Like, it is, like, whenever they've done a sequel, well, not a sequel, I mean, there was, or whenever they've done an Oz movie, the question always comes up, is this connected to the musical? Is this connected to this film? And in some, like, people say yes and no. Like, do you remember Return to Oz?
Yes.
Okay.
The film or the book?
The film.
I've not seen it. I know of it, and I've seen a lot of trailers and footage of it, but I have not seen the movie.
Check it out. It is an amazing film. On its own.
It's really creepy.
It is really creepy, but it is a wonderful film. It is an amazing film. I highly recommend that film, but some have said it's a sequel or it's a spiritual sequel. There are elements of it that make it a sequel. Now, Oz, the Great and Powerful, is that a prequel to... I've heard it's a prequel to the original movie, right?
Yeah, I've not fully seen Oz the Great and Powerful. I've seen like half of it.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say it's more connected to the film than it is to the story. I would say Wicked is more connected to the story than to the movie, but it is... Honestly, it's interchangeable.
Yeah.
Because it has so little to do with the Dorothy story.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing that you really get out of it is the origin of Elphaba, her sister, the Wicked Witch of the East, and Glinda the Good Witch, and the Wizard. We do get some more of the Wizard and what he was doing.
Yeah.
During the time. But other than that, like, there's very little connection to either the story or the movie.
Okay.
It's kind of this separate thing.
Yeah. But it seems like anytime people have done another story or another interpretation, there always seems to be some sort of indirect connection to this film. Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I don't know if that's intentional, if that's supposed to be an Easter egg, or if...
I think it's just the fact that it's so much more in the public consciousness than the books.
Yeah.
I mean, that movie, the only other movies that I can think of that have that kind of iconic status, like I would say Cinderella and Snow White, the Disney films.
I would say even like Sound of Music.
Star Wars. I'm sorry?
Sound of Music?
Yeah, I would say Sound of Music. I would say Star Wars. I would say, yeah, I think it's top tier as far as movies go because it was such an accomplishment in filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there are a few. I'm sorry?
No, I was going to say also music-wise as well. Because you can't, when you think about the story, or this film, you can't separate the music from the film.
You can't. I mean, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" is one of the most iconic songs in Western pop culture.
Yeah.
In the 20th century.
Yeah.
Like, it really is. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a more iconic song than "Somewhere Over the Rainbow."
Yeah. And I'm sure, I mean, I've not listened to Wicked, but I'm sure there have got to be like and there are some like note beats of that piece in these other films. I've noticed that. I think like with Return to Oz, there is a little piece of like Over the Rainbow note-wise.
Yeah, I think the spirit of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" is more so present than any kind of notes or segments or anything, or anything else in there. But there's definitely a spirit of that sort of thing in Oz.
Yeah, I mean, this, the music is like so essential and so iconic that you can't separate it from whether you do a remake or not, and there have been like other like interpretations. There have been like, there was a silent film, there were some, animated films, and I think there's been like a couple like, TV films, but you can't, you still remember the music. Even when you watch those movies, those other interpretations, you're waiting for that music to come up. And when it doesn't, you kind of feel a little bit cheated in a weird way, because you're like, no, you have to play those beats. You got to play that music, or else it isn't Oz. Like I think the music is as essential to this as like Dr. Zhivago, Maurice Jarre's score for Dr. Zhivago. Whenever you have like a other interpretation of Zhivago, you expect to hear that that kind of guitar music, that Russian guitar music, and when it isn't there, you're kind of heartbroken because that music, that piece of music, lends the film a certain dramatic weight to it, as well as the music to The Wizard of Oz. It touches you in ways that that it reminds you of just the depth of humanity, and also the dreams of humanity and where it wants to be, of where it wants to go, with its desires, with its dreams, in a pleasant human way. Our final thoughts on The Wizard of Oz, man.
It's pretty much the definitive 20th century story about home and belonging. That's pretty much all I have to say about it, summed up.
Same here. I mean, it's honestly, I think it's actually the pinnacle, not the pinnacle, but the beginning of the fairy tale fantasy that I think you would later see in the Disney movies. I think.
Yes.
And then, later, and I think it was definitely followed very closely in that mold later on in so many different, the other fantasy films. And I didn't even think to a fault, because they came across as very, very silly and ridiculous at times. But, yeah, it's one of the great movies. And if you have not seen it, shame on you. Like, I cannot think of anybody who has not seen this movie at all. Like, it is like the most highly seen movie right next to like Sound of Music and Star Wars. Yeah. Like, that's how relevant. Yeah. I put it up there with like the top 10 greatest movies ever. Like, that's how important I think it is, or that's how great it is in the history of film. Top 10.
Yep.
So anyway, folks, so that's going to do it for this episode of Story to Screen. And again, Next week, join us for our 100th episode live event on YouTube. And you could win 2 free tickets to the upcoming Star Wars Rogue One. So please find us on Facebook, Twitter, Stitcher. Please send us an email at s2spodcast@gmail.com, as well as our website, storytoscreen.com. I wanted to give a huge shout out to the Fairhope Film Festival, which I'll be helping out with in November. So you can check out any of the future films that will be coming out for that festival on their website. Anyway, folks, this is it. This is on the very eve of our 100th episode event. We bid you all adieu, and we'll catch you Friday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 5 p.m. West Coast Time. So please join us that night. And on behalf of Joshua Ling, I bid you all a good night. Cheers. Ow! I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were going to do that.